panel discussion is going to be on pro-life issues. We're going to look at it from the Australian perspective. We're going to look at it from the American perspective. We're going to look at ways in which those two perspectives might together suggest a way forward and a future for the pro-life movement, at least in our parts of the world. So joining me right here next, apparently Chris Check has quit, but right next to me here is Monica Dumit. Did any of you know her? Yeah? Okay, that's good. Monica is the Director of Public Affairs and Engagement for the Catholic Archdiocese of Sydney. Prior to that, she was the Archdiocesan Manager of Communications and the Communications Director and Spokeswoman for the Catholic Coalition for Marriage in 2017 during the same-sex marriage postal vote. Thank you so much for that. She is an adjunct senior lecturer in law at the University of Notre Dame, Australia, and a regular columnist for the Catholic Weekly. Some of you read her column, I take it, yes? Right? I heard some of you giving her advice earlier, good. So I guess that's enough, huh? Monica, yep. Thank you very much for being here. It's like,
great to be here.
We're going to record a special episode of Catholic Answers Focus with Monica.
And then we're going to hire her, and you'll never see her again. That guy, of course, is Chris Check, the president of Catholic Answers. And the guy next to him is Carlo Broussard, one of the world's top apologists. And you got to hear Carlo today a couple times. So, Monica, if I may, could you give us for everyone in the room and for my wife watching in California, a sense of what the situation is as far as life issues right now in Australia? What direction are things going, and what are the responses that are being made?
Mm-hmm. So anybody who has been, most of you I imagine here are Sydney-siders, so you would all know that in the last couple of weeks, New South Wales decriminalised abortion. So they took it out of the criminal code, and they were the last state in Australia to do so. So across Australia, abortion is no longer seen as a crime. It's seen as any other routine medical procedure, dental care, podiatry, along the same lines. For the most part, abortion is legal up until anywhere between sort of 16 and 24 weeks, depending on which state of Australia you're in, with absolutely no requirements at all. And then after that time, sort of, mid to late term abortions, usually with the approval of two doctors in some states for the health of the woman, in other states for social and psychological reasons included as well. The only place where you cannot get a late term abortion in Australia is South Australia, because abortion is illegal there still after 28 weeks. So now that the abortion campaigners are done with us in New South Wales, they have set their sights on South Australia, and they want to go and push for abortion not only up until 7 months, but after that as well. And so they've announced very clearly that that is their next fight. And so that's where we are in terms of abortion law in Australia. If we flick to the end of life and we look at euthanasia laws, you would know that Victoria legalised euthanasia a couple of years ago, and those laws came into effect in June of this year. At the time euthanasia was legalised, the Premier Daniel Andrews said, look, we expect about a dozen people to make use of those laws within the first year, and then probably for it to settle to about 150 per year following that. And Victoria's experience has been the experience of every other jurisdiction that has legalised euthanasia or assisted suicide, and they had, I think, 11 prescriptions drawn up in the first few weeks. And so what Daniel Andrews said would take a year to happen, happened in maybe about 5 weeks. So yeah, it's really terrible. There in Western Australia, a euthanasia law which is a lot more liberal than the one passed in Victoria, passed their lower house, and in the coming weeks will be debated and then voted on in their upper house. Still not certain that it will pass the upper house. We've got some good people in there, but it's close. Queensland is conducting an inquiry into end-of-life issues with a view to legalising euthanasia. That report was supposed to be out shortly, but the government has kicked the reporting date back until May 2020. The good thing about that is that it means that it won't happen, the legalisation of euthanasia won't happen in the next term of Parliament, because there's a state election next year and they're not going to be fighting euthanasia battle while they're fighting a state election. So essentially Queensland's being kicked down the road. South Australia is conducting an inquiry, and so the focus will probably be there after Western Australia. Tasmania looks like it will have a bill put before their Parliament next year, 2020. In New South Wales, and this is probably a nice place to finish my little wrap around the country, following the backlash from the abortion debate and following all of you and so many thousands more standing up in response to the way they tried to push the extreme abortion laws through New South Wales Parliament, the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, had said during this term of Parliament, which doesn't finish until 2023, I'm not going to touch any more conscience issues, I'm done. So while we may not have won on abortion, my friends, you have saved New South Wales from euthanasia for the next 4 years, and you should be absolutely proud of yourselves for that.
If I may, as an American, just ask this: is your sense that there's a growing pro-life response? It's getting more organized. It's getting more enthusiastic. Or are people demoralized? Where is that?
No, my sense is that our pro-life movement is growing. So we take a lot of great confidence and great hope from what we see that happened in the United States following Roe v. Wade. And so today, while we sit here, the 10th annual March for the Babies is occurring in Victoria. So they hold that march, like they do the March for Life in the States. They hold a march every year since abortion was decriminalised in Victoria, and they have some of the most extreme abortion laws in the world. And they're out there still 10 years later, growing numbers, marching. I'm almost certain that this time in 12 months in Sydney, we will also be marching for the babies in commemoration of this day, and to remind our parliamentarians that the pro-life movement doesn't go away. We are not as far advanced as the US is, but we look to you guys for great inspiration about what we can do if the people who have stood out in the last few weeks and have declared themselves a pro-life generation continue with those efforts, and hopefully we'll see some turnaround. In the interim, even though abortion's legal, it doesn't mean that it has to be used. So it could be legal on the books, but I think that also the goal of the pro-life movement is not only to change the laws, but also to make abortion both unnecessary and unthinkable, so that it can be as legal as it wants to be, but that there will be no woman ever put into a situation where she feels like she has to choose against the life of her child.
Thank you, Monica. If either of you can take this question, but could you give our Australian audience a sense of the state of things in the United States as far as the pro-life movement goes and as far as the pro-abortion movement goes?
Well, of course, we're closing in now on a half a century of sanctioned abortion since the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973. And in that time, we have had a string of Republican administrations, beginning with the Reagan administration and two Bushes, during which there were some hopeful appointments, judicial appointments, and some gravely disappointing ones. Catholics, faithful Catholics, and not just faithful Catholics, but faithful Christians who find the murder of the unborn to be just that, murder, homicide, have invested a great deal of hope and effort in supporting the Republican Party on this score, but in the main have found themselves disappointed. It is something that under the presidency of Donald Trump, who is a television performer, a real estate developer, a man that, by his own admission in his personal conduct and things that he said, is not someone that we would have expected to see so much under this presidency, in my view, with respect to judicial appointments, and I don't just mean the court, because I have reservations or doubts, if you will, about Brett Kavanaugh, for example. But a lot of lower court appointments by Trump, and in his rhetoric about the sanctity of life, born and unborn, these are words that he's used, it's something that we're seeing this in this administration. So he's the occasion, and praise God for that. The pro-life movement is now a couple of generations old, formally. That is, there are now many, what the UN calls NGOs, or what we would call 501c3s, or not-for-profits, both at the state and the national level. You know, in the very beginning, there was National Right to Life, American Life League. There is among these many organizations differences. There are among these differences of opinions about tactics and strategy. And so you have the all or nothings. There's words for these, and I'm not remembering them. But sort of the all or nothing, and then the incrementalists. But the incrementalists have made some progress, and we see this manifested very recently. That is, over the past couple of years, in the decisions of a number of state houses, Louisiana. I think Carla will know Louisiana. Alabama, Georgia, I think, is another one, and Kentucky or Tennessee,
Indiana and Ohio.
Indiana, Ohio.
Texas had a kind of one.
With basically one version or another of the same sort of thing, fetal heartbeats. If a fetal heartbeat is detected, then an abortion is illegal. Now, this is great news, because by the time, in most cases, a woman might not even know that she's pregnant, but by the time a heartbeat is detected, now all of these are going to get tested in the courts, and my hope is that there's been enough appointment where some of them will get through. The Catholic Church in America is itself sort of divided on the merits of some of these. I'm in favor of them. I think they're good, and I'm eager to see them tested in the courts. And then I'll just be quiet. But I'll say one more thing. I very much think that the most important point that's going to be made in the course of this hour, Monica has already made, and that is whether abortion is legal or not. It really is up to Catholics to change the culture in two ways. One, of course, in the moral imagination of our fellow citizens, right? And that's one. And I actually think there's a lot of opportunity here, because I think, could be wrong, I think most people still have a kind of revulsion or reaction to killing an unborn baby, or even if they call it a fetus. Even the pro-choice crowd says, well, of course we want abortion to be rare. And some of them don't. But even among people who identify themselves as pro-choice, really, well, I would never have one. I think there's a reaction to it, to the actual act of taking that life. Whether you're going to call it a person or not, so I think there's an opportunity here to help clarify the imaginations of our fellow citizens. So I think there's a changing of the culture there, and I had a second point. I forget what it was going to be, but that's okay. Carlo can.
I think that was a beautiful phrase that you mentioned, the moral imagination, and I'd be interested. I know I'm not like the panel host here, but I'd be interested to get your guys' thoughts on the whole debate of whether images should be used as a strategy for trying to awaken within people that revulsion to the act of killing the unborn, and whether or not that would be something.
I don't know if this is an issue in Australia. In the United States, you'll see people with very, very graphic post-abortion pictures of the corpse of a child who's been killed. They'll put it on the side of buses or trucks. They'll carry them at rallies. And then even within the pro-life community, there's a debate. Is that appropriate or not appropriate? Is that an acceptable thing to do, or are you actually poisoning the culture by doing that, or putting images in the public square that really don't belong in the public square? So I'll let you two.
My own view is that they are not helpful, and that they are probably morally problematic, especially when the displayer of the image, and these can be horrifying and gruesome. And there are other things that I oppose besides abortion, but I wouldn't want my 6-year-old child to see it represented, like frankly even vivisection or something like that on animals, to tell you the truth. So I think they are morally problematic. I would say that there might be circumstances where they may have some evangelical value in a very limited sense, in a controlled environment, but that would depend on knowledge of the person to whom you were showing the image. But I would say in the general application, I'm opposed to it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. That there's great goods that are undermined in the public display of it. But you bring up a good point, Chris and Monica. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Like when you talk about discerning the person having the disposition to accept that, like I wonder if on a private individual level, in one-on-one conversation, if the images could be employed as a good strategy in a private sphere.
And if I keep adding to your points, but also in maybe works of art that would be available to adults and not to children. Right. And I'm thinking about a recent movie, Unplanned, which I'll mention a little bit more about. But your thoughts, Monica?
Well, I did have to chuckle when you said that they were on the side of buses in the US. A couple of months ago here in Australia, in New South Wales actually, a pro-life group named Emily's Voice put an advertisement on the side of a bus, which was just a pregnant stomach with the mother's hands around it in the shape of a love heart. And it said, a baby's heart beats at 4 weeks or something like that. It got taken down off the buses. The Transport Minister described the image as appalling.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I have to say, this is
how did the Transport Minister come into existence? I wonder.
9 months of transport.
Self-referentially incoherent.
See, philosophy.
Philosophy.
So go ahead, Monica, continue.
Yeah, so I'm not sure we'd get away with anything more on the side of a bus. Look, I tend to agree that they're not helpful. As Si mentioned, I worked on the marriage campaign, and so one of the things that we learned very quickly during that campaign is that you change people's minds on some of these issues. Obviously, that sort of the personal evangelization and all of that is very important and the most effective. But when you're trying to change the mind of a group in a campaign setting or something like that, where you don't have that time, you need to make it personal to the people involved. If you can make it personal to their situation or have them imagine it being personal to their situation, then that gets them a long way. You put it out of the theoretical and out of the debate and into their backyard. I think pictures of a live fetus in development could do that well, but I think images of an aborted fetus, an aborted child, the only way to make that personal to somebody is if they've had that experience themselves, or if they've lost a child or something like that, and so the only gain you get is in circumstances where that person has already been through the loss of a child, whether by their own choice or not. So I think that's very difficult.
You guys may remember this. Si, you'll remember it. A long time ago, the American Lung Association, or whatever it was called, I think, they research solutions to lung cancer, maybe. But anyway, they had a TV ad. Do you remember that? And it would show the trail of cigarette smoke, and then when you traced to the cigarette, it was a fetus, smoking in the womb or something. And it was a very effective TV ad, jarring to be sure, but it was to discourage, pregnant women from smoking. And it's just something that probably a lot of people who work for the American Lung Association in that context would be very happy with that kind of image when the message that we're trying to convey is, don't smoke. But it would be just as possible for some of those people to see, this image, right, and say, that's.
What would the transportation minister make of that smoking campaign?
Yeah, right. So if I will, as long as I have the second point that I wanted to make about transforming the culture and transforming the imagination of our fellow citizens is, I think that's something that the pro-life movement in America generally has not done sufficiently, and I speak of churchmen here also, is they have not made it clear the responsibility of men involved in abortion. Men impregnate the women, men pay for the abortion, men drive the women to the abattoir. Men are morally culpable. And actually, by the way, in canon law, if you help procure an abortion, then, right, you're the canonist, you incur excommunication, right? But in any case, what the pro-life movement, and I think the pro-life movement has, I won't say they've beaten up women, right? But a woman who feels cared for by a man is not going to get an abortion. And I'll take cared for, a little further here, a woman who's married to a man in a permanent marriage. So we have, abortion comes from divorce, it comes from non-marriage in the main. And both of these come from contraception, right? So it's all the way back to, and Catholics in America, Australia, all over the West have abrogated, including Catholic theologians. And we had Michael Novak, God rest his soul, and the other one there at Catholic University, I'll think of his name in a minute. Charlie Curran. Yeah, these guys actively advocated, theologians at the Catholic University of America actively advocating against Paul VI when Humanae Vitae came out, right? And had been planning it for a long time, anticipating, well, if it comes out and he condemns it, we're ready. And they were very, very successful. And I don't know what the percentage is now, but I mean, you just go to my parish, Our Lady of Grace in El Cajon. I have a fantastic pastor, Father Peter McGuine, but I look around at the 11 o'clock Mass, where are the children? Where are they?
There's a lot here, by the way, and that's very nice to see all the children here.
Yeah. So anyway, contraceptive pill. Once we get, when they get the imagination right on contraceptive pill and marriage and non-marriage, or divorce and non-marriage get resolved, this is where it doesn't matter if abortion is legal, right? Because then, or it's less consequential. Anyway, that was the second point I wanted to make.
There's a town called Taree. Is that the name of the town?
Taree, yep.
Yeah, on October 16th, 6:30 p.m. at the Phase Twin Cinema, Unplanned is playing. Do you know the movie Unplanned? Yeah. You can bring it to a theater near you, so support it when it comes around. I do think in the context of a work of art like that, the showing of the act of abortion is actually something that can open people's eyes rather than close people off to it. So I hope you will support it. It strikes me that what we have seen, to think of it as a 50-year battle, I mean, really it's been all of our lives we've been involved in this battle. Very often the battle starts to be a battle over the language that we're allowed to use to talk about the act, not even the act. And I do feel that the American pro-life movement has wasted a lot of time quibbling over language, where there's, you'll say, well, the New York Times will call those people pro-choice, but they won't call us pro-life, they'll call us anti-abortion activists. And finally, I think American pro-life activists have said, I don't care, call me an anti-abortion activist, I am anti-abortion. But we were very sensitive about it for a long time because there's a propaganda quality to it. And there's no question that the American media, I do not know how it is here in Australia, the American media is not sympathetic to the pro-life position and is not fair to the pro-life position, because you can't tell the truth about abortion and have people still support abortion. So you have to spend 50 years lying about it. And so language gets twisted and twisted and twisted. But I do think one of the strategies that the pro-life movement has adopted in the United States is we'll create our own communications outlets. And I think it's a big part of why there are 400 Catholic radio stations in the United States now, and why there are publications and websites and all these things that are devoted to communicating in a way that just speaks honestly, frankly, clearly, humanely, and truthfully about what a human being is and what the value of a human being is. And we don't frankly need the New York Times to get it. They can call us anti-abortion all they want. We'll be anti-abortion because it kills a human being. But I wonder what if you would say something about the communications side of it here in Australia. Where are people as far as, where's the media? Are they your friend? Are they your enemy? And
I think they've answered it.
Okay.
There are some stupid questions, you know.
No stupid questions. So go ahead, let us know where is that all here?
Yeah, look, the media is not on the side of life. I think we shocked them in the last few months, and the coverage of our rallies was actually quite fair. And I think that those who saw the coverage of the rallies, we had one television station, so Channel 7 came and live streamed the entire pro-life rally from Martin Place that night. So 90 minutes on their Facebook page with thousands and thousands and thousands of people watching. Unbelievable. So I think that the youth, the family, the diversity of people who showed up to those rallies really did make a difference. No, but for the most part, the media is terribly, terribly opposed to what we're doing and to what we're saying, even to the point where they will print sort of scathing, inaccurate pieces about things like 40 Days for Life. And then when you say, oh, would you consider printing an op-ed from somebody who's actually participated in 40 Days for Life? Oh no, that wouldn't be appropriate for our audience.
One of the dirty tricks in America over 50 years is every picture of a pro-choice rally is a picture of young women looking beautiful and energetic and strong. And every picture of a pro-life rally is an angry old man. So you do not go to any pro-life rallies, all right? So, or at least look happy when they take the picture.
That's absolutely true. And I just want to pick up on something that Chris was saying before. That's the problem with that, though, is that it's caused a bit of a reluctance, I think, amongst men to stand up in terms of pro-life issues. Even in the last few months, those who were outside Parliament and things like that, I remember trying to hand the megaphone off to somebody because I was chanting outside and I needed to get back to the office, and every time I tried to hand it to a guy, they were just like, oh no, I can't take the microphone, I'm a man. And so I feel like in some senses, the way that the media portrays us then leads us to self-censor, and I'd appreciate your thoughts on it, but back to what you were saying, like, the scourge of abortion exists because men are not standing up for life. And so I think we should be proud that we have so many good men who are standing up as fathers, as brothers, and I don't think we should shy away from that, because it really is going to be the antidote to the culture of death.
I want to issue an invitation to all the single men in the room: go find a wife and get married.
And have babies.
Most in that order.
Single women, raise your hands.
Most pro-life thing you can do. I want to follow up a little something on what you said earlier, Cy. By the way, I wasn't kidding. I harangued all the young men in my office. I think and now Nathan Lee's finally getting married. Our IT guy, yeah.
He's so scared of you that he's getting married.
Yeah. But anyway, Cy, following up on language, one of the things that I think another place where I think the pro-life movement has made something of a misstep is, and this is going to reveal what a reactionary troglodyte I am. We in the pro-life movement tend to use the language of the left. We tend to use the language of civil liberties and civil rights, and that language of the revolution that comes out of Rousseau. And I would very much prefer to see the language of natural law. And so I think that we should talk more about homicide, for example, rather than the right to life. I mean, to be sure, there is a right to life. Don't misunderstand me. But I'd like to hear more talk about the natural law. Homicide is against the natural law. Can we? Because I'd almost like to have a conversation with someone who favors abortion and say, okay, well, look, can we agree that it's homicide? All right, and then you can say, yeah, but it's justifiable homicide or whatever, right? And I can say, no, it's not. But let's, if you can't, I mean, Carlo's great at this. He's written a whole book on it. Prepare the way. You got to have a common vocabulary in order to have a conversation with somebody. So let's agree what it is. It's homicide, right? So I'd like to see more language of natural law.
I agree 100% because I'm a natural law guy. But that also assumes that you both understand and agree that that which we're talking about is a human being, because homicide presupposes the taking of the voluntary taking of the innocent life of a human being. So once you got that in common agreement, then you begin talking about whether or not it is just to take the life of an innocent human being. And of course, we would argue that it's not and give a variety of reasons for that. But what you're doing is you're taking the conversation, getting back to first principles. What are we talking about? And this gets back to your comment about language. Consider what we talked about yesterday about the tolerance issue, right? Or thou shalt not judge argument. We have to get behind and get beyond the language and ask, well, what do you mean by tolerance, right? So when we're talking about the issue of abortion and the right to choose, well, choose what? What action are you directing your behavior toward? Taking the life of this thing in the womb of a mother. Okay, well, what is that thing? The object of the action that we're acting upon. Is that a human being or not? And that's where the debate is. And once we settle on that issue that it is a human being, then we ask the question, is it morally licit for us to voluntarily take the life of an innocent human being? And then that's where the next debate goes. So you make a good point.
But it's clear. There's clarity here in the way Carlo's presenting this. Yeah.
If I may, and maybe you can help us with this too, Monica, what you get in response to reasoning about the natural law is polemics. And the polemics will go something like, well, of course you care about the baby until it's born, but then you don't care about the baby once it's born. Which is not an argument, it's actually an accusation.
It's an assertion.
It's treated as an argument, or it's apparently thought to be very, very clever. But how do you recognize the rhetorical trick? Carlo is a person who's trying to have a philosophical discussion with you, but you're refusing to do that by making an accusation that he doesn't care about babies once they're born. So what do you do about those kinds of tricks?
Well, I think the trap that we fall into is that we answer the accusation instead of not accepting the premise.
Yeah.
Well said.
Amen.
And then we have a debate on how much we do and could we do more and all of those things. And to be honest, all of us could do more in the cause for supporting those who are born and struggling parents and everything like that. But we often do get trapped instead of saying, you know, we'll leave that, let's go back to the conversation at the beginning.
That's right. Yeah, because it's a distraction. It's a distraction from the argument that I'm making. And what that implies is, I don't want to have a conversation about what you just said. So let's talk about something else.
Our colleague Trent Horn refers to this as lily padding, right? So the frog will hop to another lily pad because he doesn't want to answer the question on this lily pad, so he'll hop to the other one. I highly encourage you to get Trent's book, Persuasive Pro-Life, which we have out at the table out there, and then also go to Catholic.com. Or excuse me, to put the Catholic Answers Live app on your phone, and all the archives there. We do a show, at least once a month, called If You're Pro-Choice.
Why are you pro-choice?
Yeah, why are you pro-choice?
That's Trent's show.
Are you familiar with the Why Are You Pro-Choice show? The most horrifying 2 hours of radio in America.
Trent is magnificent at this.
He is the master at it.
Yep, yeah.
At least in America. I don't know about here in Australia. Yeah. Maybe Monica might.
I'm telling you,
right, Monica could do that show, right? Yeah.
But if you want to be good and charitable, in conversations with people who think it's okay to kill an unborn baby, you should listen to, you know, a couple dozen hours of this episode of this particular show that we do. Why are you pro-choice? And you know, and there's only about 6 or 7, you know, arguments. They keep resurfacing, and Trent deals with them with such calm.
I do find the hardest one to be the lily-padding guy, the guy who calls up and says, you all do this, and Trent will answer it, and then, well, what do you make of that answer? And then the response is something all the way over here about, but you're pedophiles or something, and then it'll go over here, and then it'll go over here. And it's very, I think at that point what Trent is most focused on, and I wonder what you would make of this, is the listener, really not the guy who's jumping from lily pad to lily pad, because there's nothing much you can do about that. There's clearly an unwillingness to engage in a conversation. It's just, okay, that accusation didn't you know, make your brain explode. I'll try to explode your brain with this one. And so there's a way in which we'll continue to have this conversation as long as it seems productive, but it's really for the benefit of the listener. It doesn't feel like there's much hope that it's going to benefit the caller.
Absolutely, and I think we need to remember that when you're having these conversations publicly, there's always going to be a portion who, no matter what you say, are going to do the lily pad thing, and they're just not going to agree with you. There's always going to be a portion who are going to agree no matter what you say, but there's a great number of people, the vast majority of people in the middle, who sometimes will listen to what you say, sometimes will just be listening to how you say it. And I think that's the other thing about answering the questions charitably as well, is that when you put the, you know, and I don't want to make generalizations, but when you put those who describe themselves as pro-choice up against those who describe themselves as pro-life, just the feeling that you walk away with, you should walk away with somebody who is pro-life, walk away from somebody who is pro-life with a sense of, you know, of your own dignity remaining intact. Whereas I don't know what it's like in the States, but the pro-choice groups here that at least are vocal are, you know, can be quite filthy in their language, in their approach, and there's nothing, you know, good or true or beautiful about that. And so sometimes I do think, in addition to when you said that other people are watching, and you know the message really is for the listener, it's for the people who are watching what we're doing via any of the pieces of media that they may tune in.
Part of the state of things in the United States is that we had this Roe versus Wade decision. One of the things that this decision did is make abortion legal everywhere in the United States, every state and territory. You couldn't, but it also said you can't vote on this anymore. Okay, so it's not like it's illegal, but now go and so the fight has been, can we restore democracy so that we can restore some sense to the laws? We've had to have 2 fights, and we do seem to be on the verge of at least restoring the democracy part a little bit, where it may be that courts will be deferential to state legislatures now and say, well, if you have 10 state legislatures who pass laws that say no abortion after a certain point, and these laws are designed to test this, then clearly we should leave this to the people. It's not for judges to decide. Judges are just wonderful, humble people in America. We have very, very...
Sorry, they laughed.
Yeah.
Good job.
Look at that. I'm funny in Australia now. Thanks. So then the other battle starts. You know, once we have our democracy back, then we actually have to win votes. You know, and I don't know what the state of the populace is in that regard. How does that fight work here? Is it a court thing? Is it a legislative thing?
No, it's a legislative thing here in Australia. So, and criminal law, where abortion has been up until recently, is a state issue, and so each state has their own criminal law. But originally what the states did was that they prohibited unlawful abortion and then left it to the courts to decide what an unlawful abortion meant. Oh, okay. And so the courts then started to define, well, you know, for the life or the health of the mother. And then successive courts broadened that to what do you mean by health? And first it was physical health, then psychological health, then social health, and then it was expanded from current physical, psychological or social health to future physical, psychological or social. And so, you know, what's your future social health? I mean,
mine is very dim. Yeah, my
yeah.
future social.
So really, the courts expanded it to abortion on demand, and then it came back to the legislators to essentially ratify that.
And are Australians as a populace, and I don't mean this room, are Australians passive in the face of that? About, well, they're working it out in the courts? Or is there a sense in Australians of outrage that, wait a second, these courts are deciding the lives of children, I should get involved? What do you see?
Very, very apathetic. And really a lack of knowledge. I think that once people know, they do fire up a little bit, and I think, you know, but for the most part, this stuff's not reported, and people just don't understand it. When they understand it, one of the experiences that in New South Wales, you know, we were debating that this was going to be abortion up until birth, and the reaction that you would get from people when you told them that the reality that it would be up until birth was that they were absolutely shocked and appalled and wanted to do something. In reality, that's been the law for so long, but through the courts, but people just didn't know. Yeah. It'll be interesting if we can learn lessons from what we've done wrong on the abortion side over the last few decades for euthanasia.
So I have a question about abortion in Australia. Just a quick point of clarification, though, before I ask it. So I did use the word democracy, and it's true, we do have representative government, or the illusion of it, in the United States. We are, in fact, a constitutional republic, or we were. We're drifting towards mob rule, or oligarchy, or plutocracy. But what did happen at Roe versus Wade did amount to a judicial revolution. Abortion was illegal in each of the 50 states, and it was a matter of criminal law, right? And now it has been transformed into something now that the federal government actually has a say in. That's completely new as of 1973 in American jurisprudence. Now, there are legal decisions and events in American history that led to that and the growth of the central government, but it wasn't what the founders conceived. And if we were operating under the original conception of the founders, it could be very possible to have abortion legal in Nevada and illegal in Wisconsin. But now we're considerably more centralized. My question about abortion in Australia, in its origins in America, the contraceptive pill and then abortion had an obvious eugenics quality to it. Margaret Sanger was explicit about this. And even now, in the practice of abortion in the United States, African Americans, for example, are disproportionately represented in...
you mean killed?
Yeah.
Black children are killed in America at a higher rate than other children.
That's right, considerably higher, yeah. Yeah, I was going to say in their procurement of abortion. See, you get trapped into using this language. So is there a eugenics quality here in Australia?
Absolutely, and I think largely seen through the abortion of children with disabilities, and particularly with Down syndrome. So more than 90% of children with Down syndrome are aborted in the womb. I don't know whether you have these cases in the States. There was one just last week in the UK, and we have them similarly here, of what you call wrongful birth cases. And so Down syndrome wasn't diagnosed during the prenatal process. The child was born, and so then the doctor was sued for what they deemed wrongful birth. And I think in the UK, I know that the average payout is £2.5 million if your child with Down syndrome is not aborted, and that's what we see here. And it's a really interesting. So there's an element of cognitive dissonance here, I think, amongst the Australian population, because the fight over sex selection that we just had in the abortion debate, and there are so many people who are opposed to abortion on the grounds of sex selection.
Because half of the people were baby girls once. Yeah.
But absolutely no problem with it on the grounds of disability. Yeah. And there is almost this sort of, this Western imperialistic idea of, you look down on these cultures that abort children on the basis of their sex. But when you compare the reasons side by side, they're actually really similar. So in some of these countries where where baby girls are aborted, they do it because, you know, they don't have the same education opportunities, same employment opportunities, they're a greater cost to their families, their lives will generally be harder. The West aborts disability actually quite proudly does it. I mean, is it Iceland that's almost
zero
completely? And they say we abolished Down syndrome. Well, no, you didn't. No. You abolished everybody who
you abolished Down syndrome people.
You abolished Down syndrome people. But the same reasons, well, you know, they're not going to have the same quality of life. They're going to be a greater cost to their family. All of these things, the reasons are exactly the same. But there is extraordinary cognitive dissonance of we can see, you know, because we do it, then it's fine, and you know, because another culture does it not so much.
There was some debate in the LGBT community in the U.S. about whether scientists should bother looking for a gay gene, and the reasoning being, if you find a gay gene, there are a good number of people who will kill a child because they don't want to have a gay child. And you see again that cognitive dissonance where it would be a horrible crime to kill a child for being gay, but somehow we're making the world a better place, killing people who have spina bifida or people who have Down syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, the Greens, so they're a political party, and they're the most extreme left political party that we have here. And they have in their policy platform that they want to ban screening of embryos for intersex characteristics, and then ban abortion on the basis of intersex characteristics. They are 100% pro-abortion otherwise.
It makes you think, doesn't it, that what's valued is characteristics and not people?
Yes.
That we don't want to eliminate certain characteristics, but we're perfectly comfortable eliminating certain people.
And that gets back to the question of what is the thing? It's a human being, regardless if it has intersex characteristics, or regardless if it's male or female, regardless if the individual is Down syndrome or not. It is a human being. And so that gets back once again to that fundamental question, ought we to voluntarily take the life of an innocent human being? If we don't do it for a human being outside of the womb, whether, you know, immediately 1 year, 2 years, we don't kill an innocent human being, the 2-year-old, so too we don't kill the innocent human being in the womb of the mother, regardless of these accidents, we call in philosophy, these accidental qualities that come about.
Another question for Monica on the development of the pro-life movement here. In the United States, we went through a long period, and it's a tactic that's still used, where the essential tactic was to say, if you're pro-life, you're anti-woman. And so there was this idea of a war on women, which was this is a war on women if you're pro-life. And so the pro-life movement has had to answer that essentially by saying pro-life is pro-woman. That has become pro-life is pro-woman. And I wonder if you get the same thing here, if you anticipate that that's a trap that will be sprung at some point, and how you respond to that.
It's a similar trap that we get here, and the idea that you are opposing women's rights, that you want to control women, what they do with their bodies, and even more broadly, you want to shame them in terms of their sex life and things like that. So that's the idea. And it really is a hard one to counter, particularly when, you know, our faith leaders are male. For the most part, most of our politicians are male. And so there does seem to be this patriarchal nature to the abortion issue, and we can fall into the trap that I was talking about before of men not having a say. But I do think that there is a real place for the message that abortion is so extraordinarily anti-woman, and to try to bring that out, and bring out the stories of women for whom abortion has been not freeing, but actually an exercise of male dominance. The number of women who are coerced into abortions, the number of women, I think it's something like 1 in 5 women first experience domestic violence once they're pregnant. So that there is this real push. It's not freedom at all. The ability for women to have ready access to abortion has created another means by which an aggressive man can exercise control over her.
Yes.
Wow.
And we need to be talking about that. Too many women forced into abortion, and if you'll indulge me, I'll tell a story. Some of you have heard this. But a few years ago, I encountered a young woman. She was 14, living in a women's shelter and had fallen pregnant. And they told her that she would be kicked out of the shelter if she decided to keep the baby, because it was a women's shelter and not a family shelter. And anyway, a few things happened and we managed to get her some help, and she ended up having the baby. But decisions like that, this is your choice. If you choose to have the baby, then your choice is the consequence of having to leave the shelter, of not having the support. We have politicians who will say that, up until, women who have more than 2 children, welfare should stop after that and things like that, because it's your choice. It's your choice to have this 3rd child. It's your choice to have this 4th child. So you're choosing the consequences of us withdrawing our support from you. That's not pro-woman, that's not pro-choice. It's magnificently anti-choice, and I just think we need to be better about articulating that and not necessarily trying to talk about our pro-woman credentials, but show the hypocrisy of the pro-choice people to how anti-woman and how anti-choice they really are.
Yeah, well, you have a great pro-life leader right here in Australia. Congratulations on that. So when she calls for a rally or says we're going to have a march, will you show up? Because clearly she needs you behind her. As we close, thoughts on the future? What's the future of the pro-life movements, either from the American perspective or from the Australian perspective? What are our next steps? Or maybe, if you don't want to answer it in a global way like that, what might be the next steps that an individual might take who says, I want to be part of that?
Get married. I'm serious. All of these afflictions are because of the retreat from marriage, the rejection of marriage. Yep. Yep.
And within that marriage, God willing, have babies. And to form those children as they grow up to think pro-life, to be able to articulate what a human being is, why it's wrong to take the life of an innocent human being in a voluntary way, and to teach and form those with whom we interact on how to engage those arguments that just are assertions and merely distractions from the true questions that we need to be answering. So I would highly recommend, as my boss was saying earlier, in getting a hold to resources like Trent Horn's book, Persuasive Pro-Life, and learn those arguments and those ways of thinking through the catchphrases. That's a subject for my next book. But often we find ourselves in a catchphrase culture, amen? And everything is presented in catchphrases, right? Pro-life equals anti-woman, right? It's just this catchphrase. And many of us aren't trained to think through that smoke screen and to think through the catchphrase. So by getting resources like Trent's book, it equips you with the tools we need to think through them and to expose the folly of these pro-abortion catchphrases, and to encourage people, to invite people to think beyond the catchphrase and to think about that which is truly good, beautiful, and holy. And in these personal conversations, you can change one mind at a time, and eventually you'll have an authentic revolution.
Can you explain why the church teaches what she teaches, her immutable teaching on contraception? Can you do that? If you can't, these folks at Parousia have an abundance of resources to help you with that one thing. So the next time someone with an open heart says, okay, yeah, I love you Catholics, what's the problem with the pill? I don't get it, right? Can you explain it to me? If you're not able to do that, commit to being able to do that at the end of 30 days from now. You can do that. You can do that, and that's going to start changing this culture.
I'm going to let Monica give us the last word. I want to give my suggestion first about next steps, and that is, we really have found, you even laughed in my face when I said, is the media your friend when it comes to abortion? I'm taking that scar back home with me to America, so thank you for that. But
he has so many already.
Yeah, it's been a hurtful trip here to Australia. But you have to create your own media. You have to create your own. You got to support those people who are making great websites, who are creating new radio options or new television options. People who are making movies that are not the same trash with the same trashy messages. You've got to do that. Media. Rubbish, we were discussing whether it's trash or rubbish. We're trying to learn how to speak Australian. I'm not. I don't care about any of you anymore. But so that's all I'll say. Just when we have to get the voice of reason, and frankly, let's be honest, God's word out into the world, and the media is not our friend to do that, so we've got to make our own media options. So let's let the absolutely magnificent Monica finish this up, if you have a suggestion.
Monica.
I've got two quick things to add on to the guys with get married and have lots and lots of children. Obviously, if you're not called to priesthood or religious life, for those who aren't, for those for whom marriage didn't happen, and who don't have kids, be the best auntie you can be, the best, auntie to your friends' kids. Be the person who backs the vocation of marriage and family life to all of those around you who are in the midst of that. So we're living in an increasingly isolated world, and so many people choose abortion because they think that they are going to be isolated. So be the best damn auntie you can be. And then the next thing I will say is take inspiration from the US pro-life movement. You've heard all of these guys say that it's been nearly 50 years that they've been going, and only now they are starting to see some turn. Okay, we are in this for the long haul. And so everybody in this room, this isn't going to turn around, the culture isn't going to turn around, the laws aren't going to turn around in the next year, 5 years, 10 years. We need to be committed to this, to life for life. We absolutely need to do that. So looking forward to fighting the good fight with you here.
Glory. Thanks for her, Australia. Chris, would you do this? Let's, while we have it on our minds and hearts, let's pray a memorare for the unborn, for expectant mothers, and for the pro-life movement.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Remember, most holy Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, fly to you, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do we come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us.
Viva la Virgen.
Viva.